everybody, and welcome back to Acro's Credential Chats. We are joined this week by two awesome change makers, Shefali Dhar, Senior IT Director for Office of Instruction, and Fiona Liken, Associate Vice President for Instruction and Registrar at the University of Georgia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're really excited to have you join us because you have been kind of just going, not kind of, you have been totally going really strategically and really just powerfully and inspirationally toward a pretty cool goal of implementing, at scale, a comprehensive learner record solution, which is stuff that we've been talking about on these Acro Credential Chats. But maybe just to kind of anchor us, start us off on just, what was the why for University of Georgia, to give you a green light on this important work?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so we had been thinking for some time. We'd heard from employers and students that they were frustrated by that interview process and employers looking for those skills that they didn't really understand how to articulate. So we started the process by thinking about what are employers looking for. We knew that the students at the University of Georgia were getting leadership skills, communication skills, analytical, critical thinking are part of all of our courses, but they didn't know how to talk about that. So we wanted to present something to employers that would show and highlight those competencies for our students. And that's how we started down the path of the CLR.
So I'm hearing it had nothing to do with the technology. This was all about serving your students in just
Absolutely.
equipping them with narration storytelling of the awesomeness that they're acquiring and demonstrating at University of Georgia.
That's correct. And so we looked a long time back at ways to um, amend the transcript, the regular academic transcript, with this type of experiences and learning opportunities, which didn't go anywhere. So we knew the technology was going to be a bit of a challenge, but I will say, I think the reason we're so successful at the University of Georgia is we have Shefali and that IT and technical support as a collaborative part of this process from day one. So when we were looking at tools and trying to figure out how to do this, Shefali was a part of that from the very beginning. So.
These collaborations are so important. If I'm not mistaken, we met at the Convergence conference where it is all about, let's reach across aisles, let's shake hands, let's hug it, and do this together for learners. Fiona, before we dive into just the work, just another kind of just process question about how you got to where you are. You mentioned the transcript, and it sounds like your office is not feeling threatened on the role of the transcript as you go into recognizing other types of learning achievement, with official learning records. And it does sound like your office wants to be stewarding those learning records.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We were convinced from the beginning that we wanted a credential that could be validated and that we could stand behind at the University of Georgia. And since the registrar's office typically is behind credentials and the authoritative source for that information, it seemed like a good place to start. But also at UGA, we have the curriculum team and new initiatives, student initiatives like the First Year Odyssey Seminar Program and Double Dogs, all of that is in the registrar's office. So we have a very innovative culture here, which was really helpful.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is
So it's not
super
a
innovative.
typical registrar's office in the old sense.
Well,
More,
and one final thing is, it sounds like, when you talk about it, you wanted to make sure that they were verifiable, that you're
absolutely.
picturing your learners operationalizing the credentials, that this is that does not end with UGA issuing credentials, that's actually the start of the life cycle.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, very exciting.
Fascinating. And so you get connected, you say CLR is the way to go, and maybe just share with our audience, kind of what the roadmap has been like, and what some of the key takeaways are that everybody else needs to get on board or emulate and learn from.
Well, I'll start with the faculty piece and then I'll let Shefali tell you more about the technical piece. But we created a committee. It had broad support from across campus, which I think is essential if you're going to be successful. So we included student affairs, our experiential learning group, our assessment office, the VP for instructions office, the registrar's office, and we spent 3 years in an iterative process developing the institutional competencies, because we knew that was going to be the foundation for the CLR, and they had to be right and they had to mean something for the University of Georgia. We went out, we looked at what we were doing already in terms of learning outcomes and assessing those outcomes on campus, but then also looking at the AC and U rubric and the essential skills. We went nationally, we went to other institutions, and we took all of that and then we sort of put that together, and then we went out across campus, met with faculty groups, faculty focus groups, employers, and talked about what we were doing and how this was meaningful. And then we went through an entire faculty governance process, which is huge at UGA, which started at the University Curriculum Committee, the University Council, which is our faculty senate, then up through the president. So when it finally was approved, people knew what it was, they knew about it. And I think that's helped a lot in trying to now get faculty involved in participating. So I think that was enormous. But then we had to create the infrastructure for them to be able to submit courses and activities to have a CLR, because if students can't see that connection between the courses they're taking and the learning and the competencies, we haven't achieved anything. So we really needed a way for them to submit those courses and activities to tie the learning outcomes to the course and activity, the learning outcomes for the competency with the learning outcomes of the course, to map those things so that when students are taking the courses and participating in activities, those competencies are assessed and then put on the CLR. So Shefali can talk to you a little bit about
Yeah,
that challenge.
and like with everything, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel if we didn't have to, right? So you always want to see what you already have in terms of resources. So for us, we have a really good course approval online tool that we've used for a long time. So we added, like Fiona was saying, we added the ability to tag courses to competencies in that tool. It's very well liked by faculty, so it was an easy win for us to sort of go live with that. Um, and we have also we are working on now a similar online tool for them to submit activities, and then they can again map their learning outcomes for the activities to the learning outcomes for the competencies, all of which then we sort of grab together and then send tagged with our banner. So banner is our student information system on campus. So tagged with all of that data from the student information system then to our vendor for the student to be able to see. So lots of large data sets that will move through our campus, but again, definitely leveraging what we have in place, adding only what's needed, trying to be very efficient in this very long multi-year project. So.
Well, and one of the things that I hear from you is that for all the technology, like this is change management. That you had people, nobody felt surprised. You're trying to avoid redundancy, and at the same time, like in a kind of counterintuitive move, I think for a lot of campuses, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you sort of were almost able to sidestep potentially, especially with faculty, any sort of challenge to learning outcomes by leaning on these external competencies and saying, you don't, we're not coming after your learning outcomes. We're not trying to tell you what to do, but we are inviting you to add these other things to the mix. And you're both kind of nodding there. So I'll
Yeah.
start.
So I will just say that for us, again, leveraging the system that was already familiar to faculty was really helpful, right? So it's not like we're introducing one new thing and a new system for them to learn and then use. So that was key, and just trying to modernize it and then make the institutional competency sort of flow in seamlessly with the asks that we were doing. And Fiona did mention that we started this discussion with the faculty and campus early on in the process. So it wasn't like you're coming now and saying, oh, by the way, we need your help to do all this work for us, right? So I think that buy-in and as much as you can from early stages of a project are really helpful.
I will say that the learning outcomes piece of it has been a little bit of a challenge for faculty. So when they go into the system, they see their learning outcomes for the course, but those learning outcomes have to reflect these competencies. So if they don't already, what they have listed, they have to modify those learning outcomes or add to those learning outcomes those things they already know they're doing. They're already asking students to do presentations with clients, to write papers, to have those communication skills, but they didn't necessarily incorporate those in learning outcomes to start with. And so it's been, I think, a great win for us because now they're actually looking at learning outcomes, which, as you know, they could have submitted quite some time ago and not really revised recently. So now they're looking at them, they're revising them, so they're much more up to date with their classes, and then they're incorporating this learning that they didn't show in their learning outcomes before. So it's been a big win, and we've helped them in that process. We have Kappa and coffee sessions where they can come bring their materials and we work with them real time in a room, helping them load these things in. And so those have been really successful every 2 weeks for, I think, about a month now. We've been doing that. So
Oh, well,
And
so your office is the one providing the support on, coaching, but I guess I'm imagining that the way you're phrasing that, Fiona, is why that's, not experiencing friction. It's being, taken as a welcome pull and not a push, is that we're just this awesomeness is already happening in your
absolutely.
amazing, teaching and learning environments. We're just helping you come up with the articulation of it to tell that story.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
And I think the other thing we're doing, which is going to be helpful for the students, is we are going to publish it on our online bulletin. So we have a new website that's going to launch soon, where we will show the competencies for courses in programs, and students will be able to see that. So I think that's just another way to sort of make it more visible and available for students to search. They will be able to do this in the portal in the vendor tool as well. But on the bulletin on our UGS side, we're also going to show that information. And I think to your point and what Fiona saying, that's exactly what it is. We are not saying that this is like an admin sort of ask. This is for the faculty, for the students. It's kind of really for both those constituents.
Mm. And Shefali, something you said there reminds me, for probably a decade plus in K-12 and higher ed, we hear institutions talking about the portrait of a graduate. And, there's this sort of like image there that they have some skills and competencies. And it sounds like actually what you're doing is sort of the next level iteration of that, the next evolution of that, of, at a big data level, actually creating this portrait of a graduate. And, I kind of want to ask, and, maybe you'll have to make us sign an NDA before we release this or something, if depending on your answer, Brian, is part of this thinking about what next, that, hey, here's these credentials, and there's actually going to be forthcoming some other tools that are going to help you know what to make of your credentials and use those to look in the mirror and understand yourself, use those to progress monitor and goal set, and maybe even recognize gaps in your competencies, and that's part of how you find next semester. You're nodding, so like that,
Right. Yeah.
what
And I
next of
think
it?
Yeah, and I think for us, a lot of it is about the student. And Fiona talked about that in the beginning, right? We started the project with a very different emphasis, but we realized that this was really about the students and what they could take and what they could use then to articulate what they're learning. So the crux of it is you're already learning it. To the faculty, you're already teaching it. So we are helping you articulate on both sides. And we have some slides, for the CLR that we've been sharing. I could share that as well. Fiona, I don't know if that's something you want to do now. And
sure.
that might help us sort of just walk through.
We'll probably run out of time to actually
Okay.
do those, but what we can do is when we post the episode, if you're willing to
Yeah.
let us share a link to it,
Yep.
and also anybody who is planning your conference schedules, University of Georgia is definitely generously promoting and sharing this work. Hopefully, a Convergence next fall. For people who don't know, the call for proposals for ACRO and UPSIA's co-production of Convergence just opened up this week. Hopefully we'll get to see it at Badge Summit this summer in Boulder, and other events. And one other thing that I just want to ask in our closing moments, going back to that technology piece, you're talking about these things you're doing, and some of it is things that, at least at this kind of a scale, maybe haven't already been done by vendors or done the way that you want. And so, are you able to leverage your influence as a client to actually kind of shape how technologies are being developed right now? Or are you just having to do an RFP and pick what's closest to good?
So we did do an RFP and pick the closest to good, but since then it's been it's been a process where we have worked very, very closely with the vendor in shaping the view of the CLR, right? The vision of the CLR, and not just for us. We were very conscious that we wanted it to be something that could be used for other institutions as well. And it has been amazing. I mean, it's always a blessing and a curse to be kind of ahead of a curve, but it's been a lot of work. But I think what we're going to launch with is going to be helpful, not just for us, but I think other institutions as well.
Well, Shefali, Fiona, thank you so much for joining Acro's Credential Chats and sharing just your amazing work with us. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from people.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Have a badge-worthy week, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.